Hi everybody. So today I'm going to do a video about how the altered scale isn't actually a melodic minor mode and how it's kind of broken. So, quiet as it's kept, melodic minor harmony is actually really simple. We have, in for instance, the C major scale, a number of diatonic chord sounds which are quite familiar. So for instance, the major seventh, the dominant seventh on G, the Lydian, we have the Dorian, we have the Locrian, the minor 7 flat 5, and we have this chord. This is a sus flat 9. It's an E. So if I go through those and learn them really well, I can probably learn to hear those sounds quite quickly. They're very familiar. They crop up in jazz standards all the time. So in order to make something melodic minor, all you do is add a bit of flavour. You add a particular spice, and that spice depends on the chord. So for instance, for our Lydian, our F Lydian, we might add the sharp 5, making it into the F Lydian augmented. Sharp 11th to the G7, making it a G7 sharp 11th chord. If we go into a regular B minor 7 flat 5, again, we can add in a fancy note. This is going to be the 9th, making it the Locrian sharp 9 scale. We can do this now for these D minor 7th. We can raise up that flat 7 to a natural 7th, making it minor major 7th, very evocative sound. And we can go to our sus flat 9 chord, and we can add in the natural 13th, making it a sus 13 flat 9 sound. Very good. It's an introduction chord from Take the A Train. So it has quite a long history, that one. Okay, so I don't know if you noticed what all those chords had in common. Yeah, it's the same note each time, right? Yeah, C sharp. Where does the C sharp come from? Well, it comes from raising this Dorian mode, raising that C up to a C sharp and turning it from a flat 7 into a natural 7th, or a minor 7th into a major 7th, and that gives us D melodic minor. So all of these chords all reflect modes of D melodic minor. But the thing to remember is essentially one note. It's one note you're listening out for. So for instance, take the A train, C major, go to D13 or D9. This is a chord that's not diatonic to C major, although it is diatonic to G, which is where it's going to head in a second. But if we add in the sharp 11th, if you can practice singing that, then you'll be able to hear it. So you can do that with any of these modes. Just find that one note, that one characteristic note, and learn to hear it and learn to play it. And that one note, if I'm playing, for instance, soloing on Take the A Train, it gives you the sound of the mode or chord scale or whatever you want to call it right away. It's very beautiful. And I could talk about techniques of doing that today, but I won't, because I don't know if you noticed, but there's one melodic minor mode I've missed out. And that is the altered scale. In this key, it happens on C sharp. C sharp altered. Problem is, C sharp is the root. It's not the characteristic note. And because of this, we can't simply just take one note in quite the same way and have the characteristic tonality of the altered chord. Not least because the altered chord itself doesn't really relate to anything in our major scale. There's no equivalent chord that's only one note away. So for a lot of the time, this doesn't really matter. People are just quite happily playing it as if it was a melodic minor mode. For instance, over a C sharp altered, we can quite happily play D melodic minor, and it sounds beautiful. nothing wrong with that, okay? If I do the same example in G7, take G7, and I'm going to take the sort of thing that you might commonly learn to play over a G7 altered chord early on, might be something like this. The famous Crimea River lick. I would say Crimea River. Okay, or things like very common in sort of bebop. These figures that are kind of based, I think, on the A flat minor tonality, maybe with a ninth. But it's kept. The basic A flat minor sixth, A flat minor major seventh can actually be found in the harmonic minor scale. So I'll take C harmonic minor. The usual chord that you would play on the flat six on A flat would be A flat major seventh. What I can do is I can just take that third, which happens to be C, and take it down a half step to the note B, which exists within the harmonic minor scale, C harmonic minor. Or I could do that, I could use the sixth chord and do that. So you can see that already exists. One note that doesn't exist within the harmonic minor is this note here, but this exists in the C natural minor. And if you've done any work with Barry Harris stuff, we often mix those two scales up together. We don't necessarily call it that way, but you'll also notice that it's quite common in jazz melodies to have a flat third over the dominant. For instance, the example I always use is Blue Bossa, for instance. That happens over G7. This gives you a sharp 9. Okay? But that is not the whole sound of the altered scale, because the altered scale has a very strong flat 5 as well, and that to me is a completely different thing. You get this nice world here of the A flat minor, but I mean, although we can use it as a pass tone, it doesn't emphasize that flat 5. So in a sense, I think all of the notes of the altered scale, apart from its root note, are characteristic notes, which is why, and I think this is the way Mike Stern teaches it, it's actually a good idea to look at the altered scale in isolation. Here's another, and perhaps more theoretical reason why this happens. I can take, for instance, notes of any of the melodic minor modes, and it will work very nicely as an extended 13th chord of some kind. So for instance, if I take D7 sharp 11, I can go roots, third, fifth, flat 7, ninth, sharp 11th, 13th. And actually the nomenclature, the way we call the notes, or the intervals of the scale, are based on this idea. We might even talk about this being the ninth, even though it's even though it's in a scale, for instance. Now, if we do this with the altered scale, let's take G altered just for simplicity's sake. The way I was always taught it is it's a scale with every note flat, apart from the 1, the root. So it goes 1, flat 2, flat 3, flat 4, which happens to be the same as major third, more on that in a second, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7, back to 1 again. Now, the thing about that is that if we put that into an extended chord, we get G half diminished, 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7, and then we get flat 9, flat 4, or third if you prefer, 13th, flat 13th, back to 1 again. So this basically means you've sort of superglued a G minor 7 flat 5 onto an A flat minor major 7th. And this, of course, is the bit that we've been playing off just a minute ago with our, various licks. But this is not included in that world. When it's generally taught in jazz education settings, this scale becomes this. We flip around the flat third to instead become a sharp ninth. We enharmonically reclassify it. So then the scale becomes 1, flat 9, sharp 9, third, not flat 4 anymore, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7, 1. And because of this, we can make the application over a dominant scale. I mean, most people don't worry about this. Jazz musicians are very relaxed about enharmony generally, okay? But in this case, it does have an effect, which is that we completely muck up the third structure of the scale, because that doesn't work in thirds anymore, because we moved this note from this position in the upper upper structure down to here in the lower structure. So we end up with a flat or sharp ninth, whatever you call it, and then that's not a third. That is a third, but that's not a third there, right? So we completely mess around with the upper extension structure. So it's because of this, I think, that we have to think of the altered scale as being a little bit broken, a little bit separate. And I think, again, like even if you just use upper structure triads, there's kind of two sounds in there, right? One is this. In this case, I'm using E flat major, because that's the sharp 9, flat 5, and that's a, yeah, and a 1, really. And we can use that, which is kind of related to this sound. Or we can use the D flat triad, the tritone triad. So in a sense, there's two sounds within the altered chord, the altered scale rather. Can you hear they're different? They're different to me, and you should get used to both of them. Now the flat 5 is not unique to the altered scale. You can find it in the whole tone scale, for instance. Monk's favourite. You can find it in the diminished scale, although generally it's called a sharp 11th in that situation. On the other hand, you know, you can find, as I said, you can find the flat 9 as a bluesy kind of cross relation going over the G7, playing that blue note, that B flat against the G7, in which case it's kind of a flat third. And you can find the other notes within C harmonic minor. Which might sound like the altered scale, but it's not. I'm just playing a mixture of C harmonic minor and C natural minor. So to really unleash the sounds in the altered scale, if you do want to look at it that way, I think it can be helpful to think of those two sounds as separate. And you can't simply deal with it in the same way as you would any other melodic minor mode. Anyway, I hope that made some kind of sense. Let me know if you have any comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.